What did we play last week? D&D. Hey everybody, Matt Colville here from the bridge of the Starship MCDM. We played D&D last Wednesday night. We broke the episode up into 2 sessions. The first one was live. The second one we recorded to upload next week. So you're going to get 2 campaign diaries. This is for part 1. And then I think I'm going to record a third video, which is going to be a post-mortem on the prologue that we just played through. The prologue being the last, 6 or 7 episodes. And because I think it worked well last week, I'm going to tell you the story of what happened on Wednesday night, and then I'm going to give you my commentary on it. I'll put a timestamp in the doobly-doo that will link you directly to my commentary so that if you have already watched the episode on our second channel, hey everybody, we have a second channel, you may already know that. If you've already watched the episode, you can jump straight to my commentary. When last we left our heroes, the senior officers of the Chain of Akron, otherwise known as the PCs, are in the officers' mess on their new ship, the Somnium Tenebris, and they are discovering that somewhere in their midst is a changeling. An agent of Ajax, one of the Faceless Guard. They have come to this conclusion because Judge has just reported to King that Judge just left a discussion with Angel, and there is an Angel, the halfling executioner, one of Sweet's retainers, a junior officer, in the room with them. So there are 2 angels, one of whom is in the room with them. Hearing this, Angel exclaims his astonishment, using words I will not repeat in this video. And we begin the evening with Judge crossing the room, grabbing Angel by the throat and lifting him up, accusing him of being the changeling and trying to intimidate him into revealing his true nature. But all that happens is Angel chokes, is unable to speak, and then when Judge releases him, he exclaims his innocence and asks what the heck is going on. The heroes concoct a plan, which, by the way, they did at the D&D lunch we had the week before, and I've asked my players, I said, you guys, obviously, you all work together, so I can't stop you from talking about D&D, and part of the fun of playing is talking about the game after the fact, but let's stop doing that thing where we all get together after the show, and we all talk about what we're going to do next, because what happens is the plot advances during those meetings and you folks don't get to see it. And as a result, people are confused. People watching are like, I feel like I missed something. Yes, you did. You missed them planning. And in this instance, their plan was to use Big Cat. They remember that Big Cat growled at Zarok, the dwarf, who they now realize was an imposter, or probably was an imposter. And so their plan is to get everyone in the Chain of Akron, all the soldiers, of whom there are some 33 left at this point. King is going to give them a speech announcing himself as the new commander and saying, don't worry, we're down, but we're not beaten. And this should be, they think, a perfectly normal thing for the senior officers to do. And therefore, the changeling will not suspect that anything weird is happening. And while King is giving a speech, Big Cat can be walking back and forth amongst the rank and file. And when Big Cat senses the presence of the changeling, he will alert the senior officers, thereby revealing the spy in their midst. They spend some time talking to the navigator, the mind witness that runs the ship, under the premise, based on my description, that it really is like a Star Trek computer, that it can do all the things I've seen the computer do on Star Trek, that it can open and close doors remotely, that it can deny access to levels or rooms based on characters' identities, that it can scan for life signs and describe the biologies of the creatures that it finds. And I explained to them, I let them down, it doesn't do all of those things. It can open and close doors remotely, and it can tell them how many living creatures are on each deck, but that's about it. So even with that, they have a tool where they can say, all right, how many living creatures are on each deck, and get a report and use that to track movement. They'll know if someone goes from one level to another, if the mind witness tells them there are now 6 living creatures on the battle deck, for instance, when a moment ago there were 5. Angel, the NPC halfling executioner junior officer, reminds the heroes that the changeling is currently disguised as him and thinks he is dead. He says there's no way the changeling would guess that King would resurrect me, so it doesn't know that you know I'm actually alive and that it's out there disguised to me. We should use that to our advantage. And King says, yeah, that's a good idea. We got to make sure that the changeling doesn't see you, because if he sees you, he'll know that we're onto him. So we've got to hide you somewhere. And Angel's like, I don't want to hide. I want to stick my dagger into that thing. And they're like, yeah, well, of course you do, but you should go back to your quarters. Angel is reluctant to go back to his quarters, but the heroes are like, don't worry, I'll escort you down, King says. No one should be alone. And then the heroes all decide, let's all go down together. Let's all go down to Angel's quarters together and drop him off, and then we'll go gather the troops. They all pile into the elevator. The elevator descends down to the floor with all the senior officers' quarters on it. The elevator doors open. Big Cat and Copper get off, and in that moment with the door open, Angel turns to Judge and says, "Hail Ajax," and attacks. The angel that has been with them that whole time was indeed the Changeling. There is now a battle, a pretty elaborate one, in the elevator, in these close quarters. The first thing the Changeling does is it uses its fear ability, and it successfully fears both Slim and Judge. That effectively neutralizes Slim because he can't move toward the source of his fear and therefore cannot get an attack. But Judge is already standing next to the Changeling. And as a result, even though Judge is feared, Judge can still attack just with disadvantage, and Judge does so. The Changeling drops a fireball on the heroes, but every time they attack it, its wounds bleed this thin, oily black substance that when it hits the floor starts to corrode the floor, starts to eat away a hole in the floor of the elevator. And Copper realizes if we keep attacking this thing, we're all going to plunge down into, the elevator shaft. Before that can happen, Judge uses the Illrigger's baleful interdict, which puts a seal of Asmodeus on the thing, basically branding it, and then attacks it, consumes the seal, and does a ridiculous amount of damage. The Changeling is now wounded enough that it turns into a gaseous mist and escapes down through the holes created by its acid blood. The heroes immediately press the elevator buttons to get it to descend one level because they're trying to catch up to the Changeling before it assumes someone else's form. And as the elevator is descending, they hear from coming out of the hole in the floor this blood-curdling scream. The elevator descends to the next level, the doors open, and they see all the members of the Chain of Acheron all in this large, it's like 15-foot wide hallway, all facing away from them. As the senior officers walk forward to find out what's going on, the crowd parts and they find a charred humanoid body, completely now unrecognizable, on the floor of the hallway. The heroes ask, "Who was this?" and everyone shrugs, they don't know. King immediately asks Slim, using his telepathic conduit, to order the ship to lock down every deck and alert them if anyone moves from one deck to another. How many people are there on the deck above? There are 6 living creatures on the deck above. How many are on this deck? There's, I think, 27, which accounts for everybody. There's no one else anywhere else on the ship. King realizes that none of the 6 characters on the deck above can be the Changeling. They know the Changeling's on this deck somewhere. So let's get everyone on this deck into the amphitheater for the speech. Let's continue with our plan. So the 27 soldiers on this deck all start marching down the corridor hallway toward the amphitheater with the heroes, with the senior officers right in the middle of them. And Judge hears someone behind him ask Two Shoes, one of the junior officers, "Hey, so are we just supposed to start taking orders from this alien?" Meaning Slim, the Githyanki. Instantly concluding that whoever just spoke must be the Changeling, Judge spins around, identifies the speaker, and casts Hell's Lash, which creates an infernal conduit between himself. Like literally a whip made of fire reaches out and lashes around this, I think it's a half-elf soldier. Not hesitating a moment to question Judge's actions, Two Shoes immediately flanks this other soldier, this half-elf soldier in the chain, and attacks. And now Judge and Two Shoes are attacking this creature. Two Shoes, the paladin's attacks cause this half-elf soldier to bleed this thin, oily, black substance, and the heroes all realize that is the Changeling, which is amazing because in that moment, the other heroes talk about how they thought Judge had just kind of gone overboard. There is now a battle in the hallway against the Changeling. It drops another fireball on the heroes, which does, a lot of damage to Slim, I think, and almost no damage to Judge, because Judge is making his saving throws and has fire resistance. And the side effect of this is that a large, like 6 other members of the rank and file soldiers in the chain are all obliterated from this fireball. The Changeling suddenly vanishes. Copper, intuiting where the Changeling must be, attacks with disadvantage and hits twice. Copper's arrows stop in mid-air and then vanish as they hit this invisible creature. Slim, the Githyanki Battlemaster, Phil's new character, attacks one of the 2 judges, the one standing where the Changeling was standing a minute ago. I tell him, "You've got a 50% chance of attacking the right one." And I roll behind the screens and he attacks and I say, "Okay, please do your damage. Anna, how much damage does Judge take?" And they're like, "Oh, can we tell it's Judge?" I'm like, "Yep," because Slim's attack knocks him to the ground and you can see in the wound normal tiefling blood bleeding. So they know that is the real Judge, and the other Judge must be the Changeling. At this point, having fireballed the heroes twice, having used its swap ability, having gone invisible once, and used its gaseous form once today, the Changeling is out of tricks, and the heroes are able to cut it down pretty rapidly. They watch as its dying form twists and writhes, and a half dozen different figures, different characters, many of which they recognize, some of which they don't, emerge from the boiling mass of flesh. There's so much heat is generated in this reaction that steam starts to boil off the thing, and then it finally rests dead in an amalgam of different forms with 6 or 7 different feet and 2 or 3 different heads. That is one of Ajax's faceless guards, one of the ways he is able to keep power, because you never know when someone you're talking to might be an agent of Ajax. So the heroes have now stolen the Mind Flayer ship from the Gith that Ajax had sent to find them, and ridded themselves of the faceless guard that had hitched a ride on the boat 3 days before. The way Ajax's Wizard Mortem was tracking them, he can sense, he always knows where the Changeling is, which means they have finally eliminated all of the threats that they had accumulated in Black Bottom. This is the end of the prologue. King gives his speech, gathers everyone together, and gives I thought, quite good speech that Lars wrote with little editing for me. This is the speech that King gave. You all know we've taken a lot of losses in recent days. We were almost 400 when we arrived in Black Bottom. Now we are less than 30. Commander Red is dead. Commander Sweet is dead. Senior Officer Nails is dead. They live forever in the Chronicle. 3 days ago, I was a junior officer. Some of you knew me. Now that I'm commander, everyone's asking, who am I? Where did I come from? What did I do before? Here's the only answer you need. I was born here, in the chain. Before this, I was the chronicler. The Chronicle tells of many times in the past when the chain was even smaller than it is now, but we survived. While we remain, the chain is unbroken. While the Chronicle endures, the chain is unbroken. We have made an enemy of Ajax. It seems he's made our deaths personal. But for the chain, death is business. Our outstanding contract is to assassinate one of Ajax's closest advisors. He has sent agents across the timescape to find us. He means to kill us. I intend to fulfill the contract. We're going to Capital, where Ajax has many enemies. We will find allies there. I think it likely that many of our comrades survived Black Bottom. They will know to find their way to Capital. The Somnium Tenebris is ours. It will be our new base of operations. Any of you who have any experience with boats, please report to Boots. He will be assembling a crew to man the ship. Our new friend Slim will be piloting it. You may be thinking, Ajax can't be beaten. 3 days ago, I would have agreed with you. But there's only one explanation for why Ajax has chased us across worlds. It's because he fears us. He fears us because he thinks we can win. And now so do I. That's it. You know your jobs. Everybody back to work. And that was the end of the session. So I thought this session went pretty well, but it could have gone better. I mean, I would say probably it didn't go as well as I hoped it would, but this is one of the problems with doing a plot like this. Let's infiltrate the heroes. Let's get a spy, a changeling in their midst, because I don't know on a moment-to-moment, I can't plan on a moment-to-moment basis what the heroes are going to do. It's all reactive. It's all me role-playing the changeling, reacting to what the heroes can do, and that is it's sort of the absence of adventure design. I have no idea where the next encounter with the changeling is going to be, or how many there are going to be, or under what conditions the fight's going to happen, or what the heroes are going to do. So all I can do as the DM is know what the changeling can do really well, and know what it wants, and know how it would behave, so that I can respond to what the heroes do, and that's what I did. So I think we all imagined a version of this scenario that was a lot more dramatic, that had a lot more paranoia in it, with the heroes not knowing who was who and who they could trust. But I never got the chance to isolate any of the characters after last week with Judge and King each being separated. I had hoped that I was going to have the opportunity to isolate some of the other heroes from each other. I had these cards printed out that said, "You are not the changeling." I got this amazing idea from one of the users on our subreddit who suggested that I print out cards that say, "You are not the changeling," and I hand them all out to the players and say, you can look at your card, but don't share the information on it. And that would create this instant paranoia among the players if they all looked at their cards and they all said, of course, each player doesn't know that every card says you are not the changeling. This is classic. There's an actual role-playing game called Paranoia, which is a comedy sci-fi RPG, which I have a lot of affection for. This is straight out of the Paranoia handbook. It instantly would have created this doubt. Some of the players would have probably thought, okay, I bet all the cards say you are not the changeling. But even those players would have wondered and wouldn't have been sure. But because the players, there was a moment where it looked like King and Boots were going to escort the Changeling down to Angel's quarters, and that would have been an opportunity to get two of the heroes away from the others. But no, they immediately were like, no, let's all stick together. Let's all stick together. Now, this is a kind of thing where when you're making a movie, right, or a TV show or a novel or whatever, you can create these artificial moments of drama. The heroes would never split up like this, but you can create moments where they have to, right? But here in an RPG, I don't have control over the players. They can do whatever they want. And so that notion, that version of the scenario that we had in our heads, which was very like John Carpenter's The Thing, it was going to be a moment of who can I trust, who's who, that never really came up, which is disappointing. Some people are going to be disappointed by that. But look, this is it's not a TV show. This is not a scripted event. It is a D&D game. It's never going to be entertaining the way any kind of TV show or scripted drama is, because it's not scripted. The players are always reacting to stuff. But really the reason we're doing this is not as entertainment. It's more as an example for the way I run D&D and to give me lots of opportunities to come up with lessons from the table. And I think it's doing that really well. The scenario with the elevator was pretty silly. The one where all the heroes and Angel, the Changeling, all have to pile in the elevator and ride it down, because that meant the elevator had to be ridiculously huge. It had to be way larger than any elevator would ever be. But I didn't have a choice. I had described in earlier sessions, I had described the heroes as all piling into the elevator and riding it up. I don't know if I'll ever be a good enough DM to come up with this kind of foresight, but I would have needed the foresight to say, the elevator's only 10 by 10. It'll only fit 4 characters. You guys are going to have to take multiple trips. Now, that probably would have created more drama in the battles for the Somnium Tenebris, because they couldn't load their entire party, all their resources. In other words, they couldn't load all their resources onto the elevator all at once and then disgorge them all instantly. They would have had to leave some characters behind and start the battle earlier. So that would have been more dramatic. I take back what I said. I think if I had been thinking ahead, if I had been planning, if I had taken those battles more seriously, the battles against the Dwagar and the Gith, I probably would have come up with the idea of splitting the party by using the elevator size, but I didn't think of that. And so now I was stuck with this stupid big elevator, and that it harmed verisimilitude, because even Tom playing Copper was like, this elevator is stupid big, but I was stuck with it. And it also robbed me of the opportunity to separate the heroes, which would have been great for the Changeling. The battle in the elevator was pretty cool. The only kind of degenerate case we had was that Slim wasn't really able to do anything because he was feared by the Changeling. Fear is a weird spell. It's something where when the heroes use fear against their enemies, no one really matters. Like, the DM doesn't matter if 3 of the 8 creatures in this battle all turn and run. It's not that big a deal. Even if all 8 turn and run, it's not that big a deal. I've got another encounter. I could recycle this encounter and just reskin it, and the players probably wouldn't even notice. So me not getting to use my resources is not that big a deal. But one of the players having to spend an entire battle doing nothing because of fear is it's not fun. It's anticlimactic and it's not fun. Fear is a weird spell. The devotion to natural language in the player's handbook is useful about 80% of the time, but then there's 20% of the time where I wish they would just use direct language in order to be clear and aid in usefulness. So, for instance, the fear spell says that it frightens the targets, and then if you keep reading, it says that the targets have to use the dash action to get away from the source of their fear if there is a safe path. I think it would be very easy for somebody to read that spell and go, what does frightened mean? What does frightened do? And then keep reading and go, oh, look, here's a description, a mechanical description of what the spell does, and conclude that you have to move away from the target of the fear using dash action is what frightened means. That would be a perfectly legitimate conclusion to make, but you would be wrong, because frightened is a condition described elsewhere in the player's handbook. So what the fear spell does is it imposes that condition on a number of targets who fail their save, and does a little extra. It does more than just impose the frightened condition. It also requires them to move away. But it doesn't say that. How would you know, if you were playing this game for the first time, that there was even a condition called frightened? They could just say it imposes the frightened condition, so that now you would at least know there was something to go look up. And furthermore, they could actually put the page number of the frightened condition in there, assuming they didn't just want to reprint what frightened does. So I think the wording could be better, could be clearer, but also I just think the design is somewhat flawed, because I, as a dungeon master, I don't really mind if the players use fear on my bad guys and cause some number of them to have to run. I've got other monsters. Even if all the monsters fail their saving throw and they all have to run, that's no problem. I can just I can reuse that entire encounter. I've got other encounters waiting anyway. I could reskin this one. I'm not really bothered by that stuff, but the players find it deeply unfun to sit there for for an entire combat doing nothing. It's not what they signed up to do. And as I think you all know by now, I'm a big fan of an asymmetry between the hero's abilities and the villain's abilities. The villains become a lot more interesting when they have these crazy abilities, like the Changeling's ability to swap. This is a purely custom thing that I made up. I didn't make it up on the fly. I designed it ahead of time. I had to try 3 different times to find someone who could fail their wisdom save. The ability for the Changeling to disappear, target somebody, cause them to disappear, and then a moment later, they both reappear. And I could have made it so they reappeared in different places, but there weren't enough empty spaces in the battlefield because it was such cramped quarters. That ability, and now you don't know which is which. You don't know which, and you could, if it role played out well, you could have Judge or the Changeling each exclaiming, kill him, I'm the real judge. That would have been a dramatic moment. But that is a purely boutique ability that no players have, to the best of my knowledge. I like stuff like that. I like giving the villains boutique abilities that the heroes do not have access to. And if you accept as a fundamental premise of the game that asymmetry, then you don't need to have fear as an ability that bad guys have. There aren't a lot of games that we play where you can spend your entire turn doing nothing. And so doing it in D&D, where you have so much invested in the game, right? And unlike most games we play, we are continuing a story. We're building a character that we have a lot of affection for. We want that feeling of making progress. So you could design a game where instead, right now, the spells are a resource that many classes have access to and many bad guys have access to. And as far as I know, no spell is off limits for the bad guys. But you could design a system where the bad guys just have different abilities than the heroes do, and so the heroes don't have to worry about failing a saving throw versus fear. There could be some other condition that an enemy terror ability. That's how we could distinguish them. The heroes have fear, the enemies have terror. Fear works one way. Terror does something different. There are lots of conditions in 4th edition I think you could use to simulate terror that would reduce the player's effectiveness but not eliminate it. I think the coolest thing that's happened in the game so far, and this is a campaign that in only 6 episodes, a lot of amazing stuff has happened. But I think my favorite awesome moment was Judge hearing a nameless NPC rank and file soldier of the chain asking a perfectly legitimate question. Hey, are we supposed to just take orders now from this alien that they made a senior officer? Are we supposed to trust this guy? And Judge spins around and without hesitating casts Hell's Lash, being 100% certain that is the Changeling. In the game, Anna had to make a roll to see, do I know who was speaking? But because she succeeded, that meant Judge just knew. Judge heard, turned, and saw a half-elf soldier and attacked. And then, of course, Two Shoes, without questioning what's happening, if Two Shoes sees Judge is doing something, a senior officer is acting, then Two Shoes is going to act as though the senior officer knows what they're doing. That was a great little 1-2 punch right there. Made better by the fact that the players all talked about afterwards how they thought Anna had gone crazy. They thought this was Judge just being paranoid. Because, I think it was Tom playing Copper who said, it seemed like a reasonable question to me. And there were people watching in chat who thought, Matt just decided that this is going to be the Changeling because it was such a good idea. No. I knew that was the Changeling. This is a big part of the way I run my villains, is that I think the thing that makes the villains beatable is their hubris, right? The fact that they underestimate the heroes or they overestimate their own abilities. So what is the Changeling? This is literally what I was thinking as they were playing. I didn't know how I was stymied. I needed a way for the heroes to flush the Changeling out. Otherwise, the plot was going to kind of grind to a halt and it wouldn't be fun. And I wasn't aware that Tom, playing Copper, was about to have a brilliant idea, basically stealing that moment from the thing where we test everybody's blood, because when it bleeds, we can see that it bleeds thin, black, oily liquid. I didn't know he was about to suggest that, so I was like, well, crap, I have to give the players the chance to find this guy. Well, the Changeling's in the crowd. He's pretending to be one of the soldiers. I'm just going to have him try to sow discord. I'm going to try to what would the Changeling do? It would try to sow discord. It would try to get the heroes not to trust each other, and it would never imagine that the heroes would doubt it. It's such a good spy that it's going to say something incredibly reasonable that sounds plausible but gets them to doubt each other even a little bit. He didn't say, I think that guy's the Changeling. He just said, are we supposed to start taking orders from this alien? And that that's something I just improv'd in the moment. That whole arc, that whole idea that the changeling's in the crowd, it's going to have to give the players a chance to find out about it. Otherwise, it's bad design. What would it say? It would try to sow discord. What kind of discord would it use? Let's take advantage of the fact that there's a giant Githyanki walking around that is now a senior officer. Yeah, that's a good idea. And it worked. It worked so well. I was so happy. I was so proud of Anna that she just acted. This is literally why Judge is called Judge. If you could read the backstory Anna wrote, it is because people in the chain would say, who are you, the judge, jury, and executioner, right? Because a lawful, evil, ill-rigger paladin is very judgmental, believes in his own decisions, doesn't hesitate, immediately casts Hell's Lash, which, by the way, was a great spell to use because it meant that everyone could see which one the changeling was. So that, for me as a dungeon master, moments like that are the juice for me. I love that. Again, not sure the game is ever going to be that good again and have those moments, but we'll see. Stay tuned. The plan that Tom playing Copper came up with, where we could just cut their fingers, get some blood, and if they bleed black oily liquid, then we know it's the changeling. That plan would not have worked because the changeling, if given only a couple of moments, the changeling can produce whatever organs it needs to pretend to be the thing that it is. It's not a cosmetic change. It's a complete biological change. It can make organs. It could make a little, a blister under the skin of blood that when you cut causes whatever blood it needs to look like come out. Which is why the angel in King's quarters had red blood. They didn't notice any black, thin liquid because it made the blood it needed and then killed itself. I described it as having a cut throat and a bloody dagger, right? That's the one thing it couldn't disguise because it's literally going to kill itself. So it's going to have that blood on its dagger. But it seemed like Angel got in a fight. So, yeah, by the way, the angel that King found had killed itself. It wasn't playing dead. It had, in a moment of desperation, knowing what King could do, it waited in King's quarters until just it sees King coming down the corridor. It closes the door. It kills itself, knowing or believing. And I was right, by the way. The changeling took a risk on this the same way I took a risk. I wasn't risking my life, but the changeling took a risk just like I did. King could do anything, but I knew King had Revivify, not only because that was part of the plan with Nails, but because I had looked at King's character sheet while Lars was out of the room to make sure he had it memorized. King immediately casts Revivify. This is the changeling's plan to make him beyond reproach. At this point, no one is going to believe that that's the changeling. They're all going to accept that it must be the real angel. And in fact, I think Judge probably would have just taken for granted that that must be the real angel. But I think the players had failed to understand the timeline. I think they thought it was possible that there was just one angel pretending to be different things. I don't know. But the changeling thought, this will make me beyond reproach. I'll create, some blood under my skin here and I will kill myself. It dies. King revivifies it. I actually said to Lars, do you have Revivify? He goes, yep. I said, do you have it prepared? And you haven't cast it yet? And he's like, yeah, because I wanted to make it seem like this was King's idea rather than me / the changeling manipulating King into doing what I wanted. So I think that's some good dungeon mastering. If you can trick the players into doing exactly what you wanted them to do, but it seems like it was their idea and that you were surprised by it, then it feels super earned on the player's part. But of course, it was a setup. People in chat were asking why, if that was Angeling in King's quarters when he had King alone, didn't he just fireball King a couple of times? But his goal wasn't to kill King. His goal was to infiltrate the senior officer corps. So what he could have done was he could have attacked King, killed King, and taken King's identity. But I hadn't done enough. I didn't feel like I could get away with that. I hadn't done enough work yet to set up the fact that there was a changeling. Once the players know there is a changeling, then at that point, everything's fair game. And I can bust out the changeling in a moment and have him kill a player dumb enough to have their character go off on their own with another hero, with Angel. If that had happened, then absolutely, I would have the other characters, other players leave the room. I would have done the combat. If the changeling won, then now they would come back and find dead Angel and King, or maybe Boots, now as the changeling. But you can't just bust that out without any warning. At that point, Lars did not know that there might be a changeling in their midst. And so just having his character die, it might have been dramatic, but having his character lose a battle like that without ever having the opportunity to to know or guess that there might be a changeling in the party would have been, I think, bad design. A changeling, by the way, is something I made up. People in chat were convinced that they were a slod, and I started with it. I never intended them to be slod. I always knew it was going to be a changeling. I looked at the stats for doppelganger. Doppelgangers are too weak. They don't have enough cool abilities, but I did take the green slod and use it as a template and then layer on some legendary actions, which I think are important because legendary actions let villains act on the hero's turn. And if you're ever going to have a solo battle where all the heroes are going to go and then one bad guy goes and that one bad guy has to survive all of the heroes acting in order to do its thing, then I think you need to bust out some legendary actions, even if you're only first or second level. I think a third level bad guy can have legendary actions. They just need to be third level appropriate, not plus 10 to hit and 10 to 8 damage, but plus 4 to hit and 2d6 damage or whatever. The session went pretty well. I was disappointed that it wasn't as dramatic as I think we all imagined, because I didn't have the opportunity to isolate any of the other heroes. I couldn't think of a good reason to do it. But given the constraints I was operating under, I was pretty happy with the way it worked. I had planned on the changeling having acid for blood. I didn't intend on using it in the xenomorph sense where it's going to kill you. I purely wanted to use it in the floor beneath it dissolves, because one of its legendary actions was gaseous form. So that over the course of the battle on the Somnium Tenebris, it's going to be eating away at the deck below it and then be able to disappear. I originally thought the battle was going to happen on the Rosso Cielo and it would be eating through the wooden deck, but I had the opportunity to describe how the flesh of the ship's floor disintegrates and dissolves, leaving this thin, bony lattice underneath, reminding everybody that it is a living ship. So that was cool, and there was definitely a moment where the players were frustrated because the changeling had disappeared into the crowd, and they couldn't think of any way. Copper, it was now because it noticed Big Cat growling at it as Zerok, it did a better job next time disguising itself, so that was only going to work once. So their plan where Copper, Big Cat was going to sniff the thing out, I would have let that work if there was no other way for the heroes to find it, because the heroes need to have the ability to find it. And there was definitely a moment where the changeling had disappeared into the crowd, they didn't know who it was, and I wasn't sure how are they going to find it. And that they were a little bit frustrated, and I was a little bit worried, and in that moment, I felt really low in that moment. I felt like, I'm a bad DM. They're confused, although they didn't know they were confused. They just didn't have a plan, right? They didn't have a plan. And that's when I came up with, let's have the changeling use a little bit of hubris. It thinks it's smarter than all of them. It's going to try and sow some discontent. And that was it. That's all I had to do. So even though it wasn't as dramatic as I thought, and there was definitely a moment where the players, they didn't realize they were lost, but I thought they were lost, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And I was like, this isn't fun. And it wasn't fun for Phil to have that combat where he didn't get to do anything. Overall, I would say pretty good session, B+. That's it. We stopped, and then we played for another 90 minutes after that, which you'll get to watch this Wednesday night where the players finally arrive in Capital. And there'll be a campaign diary for that. And then either as part of that campaign diary, I think I'll make another video that will be the prologue post-mortem, where we're just going to talk about how I think the campaign has gone so far. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed this content and you want more of it, you want to support us working here at MCDM, making all these videos for you, you can come by our store and pick up a copy of Strongholds and Followers, a supplement for 5th edition. We have a Patreon. You can come support us on Patreon. Patreon is where the monthly Q&A questions come from, where the chain reaction question comes from. It's our backers, it's our patrons on Patreon. They're asking those questions. And we're going to do another Kickstarter for Kingdoms, Organizations, and Warfare, which is going to have a lot of really neat mechanics in it, and more of everything people like: more monsters, more items, more courts, more members of the existing courts from Strongholds and Followers. If you want an alert when Kingdoms, Organizations, and Warfare's Kickstarter goes live, if you don't want to miss it, there's a link in the doobly-doo to a webpage where you're just going to give us your email. We're going to email you only ever once to let you know, hey, the Kickstarter's live. Until next time, peace out.